We're on episode, you should know this, Ali.
89.
Damn right. Yeah. 89 was one of my first stops in Tainan. It was kind of a a local KFC knockoff. It was definitely called 89 Restaurant. That's how 89 is meaningful to me from my early Taiwan days, studying Chinese and going to the Bajio, which they're now closed.
Hey, wasn't there a Cafe 89 as well in Shanghai around, it was 89度. I don't know if that
Oh,
rings to anyone, but
you're
that's what
thinking of
exactly,
no,
or is
yeah,
it
you're thinking of
oh,
85.
is
Basu
it
C.
85?
Yes, you're
5
thinking
degrees,
of
the
the
perfect
85.
temperature to
That's
have
right,
coffee.
coffee. That's
That's what
right.
it is.
Yeah, it's another Taiwan chain. They offered small cakes and things, and their whole mission was that you could get a coffee and a cake or something to eat for the price of a Starbucks.
Okay.
They kind of fizzled out now, but I mean they're still around, but just didn't take off like Luckin or any of those other channels. But we've got more important things to talk about today. You know, Ali, we're continuing our discussion about the industry on today's podcast. As we know, the advertising industry is experiencing its most dramatic talent upheaval in decades as traditional agency models collapse under the weight of AI automation, client cost cutting, and never-ending consolidation. While the last episode we talked with our friend Yako, we explored the structural changes reshaping agencies themselves. Today we're taking more of the human side of things and talking about those opportunities, both from the junior roles that might be eliminated by AI tools to senior executives suddenly finding themselves unemployed in the prime of their earning years. So the talent pipeline that once reliably fed the industry is breaking down. Universities where I'm currently at are still preparing students for jobs that may not exist, and the skills that may careers are suddenly becoming obsolete. Yet with all this chaos, some agencies and people are thriving and reimagining themselves and the way talent looks like in an AI augmented client direct world. We can't think of anyone better to shed light on this subject than our guest today. We're joined by Jean-Michel Wu, our good friend from my good friend from, oh my gosh, we met in Thailand many years ago, and
Wow.
I've been following each other ever since. Jean-Michel is a 2-decade career talent expert spanning talent leadership across many creative and media agency circles, giving him a unique perspective on what it takes to thrive in this new landscape. He's now the founder of Tripitakka Consulting. He focuses on talent development and coaching, helping both individuals and organizations unlock their potential in an industry that's completely redefined. Jean-Michel, welcome to Shanghai John. Ali and I have this theory that talent people see trends before the headlines. So what's the one shift in the communication talent market right now that agencies haven't really woken up to yet?
Yeah, I think you're right about the recruitment industry really being the canary in the coal mine, very similar to how marketing as well, because we're so subject to all of the constraints around the economy. So, when it comes to recruiting, we see things much quicker. But in this particular context, I think probably the writing was on the wall quite a few years ago. If you go back to Publicis and how they went through a transformation over 10 years ago, there was a lot of conversation about why they're doing it now. And I think Sir Martin coined evolution over revolution. And I think Publicis really did the cuts as drastically as they could to enable them to grow, and that's where we are today. So I think looking back and seeing like the history of where we've got to now, Publicis has really been more of the revolution. And I recall I actually met the team that had to go through each country and meet all of the 3 media CEOs, all of the 3 creative CEOs, and then make a decision over the weekend which one would have to stay and which 2 were going to leave. And I recall it was incredibly traumatic at the time. And I think a lot of the changes happened there were indicative of what's happened today. The interesting thing is with Publicis, because they did it so quickly, a lot of the people that were let go still had an opportunity to go back into the environment and work, and continue in their careers. Now everybody else has followed suit and they've kind of gone through the evolution. And today, unfortunately, we've got a lot of people losing their jobs because of the transformation that's happened. and they don't have any additional roles to move into. So, based on that, I probably would say Publicis was in the right to do that at that time. And now we're seeing like the repercussions, which has jointly been impacted not just by the consolidation, but obviously AI and outsourcing. It's become quite a drastic scenario. So I really enjoyed last episode, Bashabal, where Yako's comments were fantastic, and I really took a lot out of it. And I also wanted to say Ali's astute view of what do creative agencies actually do, or what does the industry actually do, is it makes value creation for our clients. And I, thoroughly agree with that. And I think we've kind of lost that as being a central theme of what agencies actually should be doing. Again, I looked at Mark Heap's conversation about the value creation for the clients rather than for the agencies in China. And it really made me think, yeah, that's what we've kind of lost. So when you look at when you talent function now, I think it's really about trying to identify what is the value creation that the agencies do, and how can the talent support that.
I think that's a great point you made, Jean-Michel, about Publicis, because they're always in this era of consolidation. I think they're always portrayed as the forerunner, that they did things right, they put this one P&L together. But the reality was that a lot of people were laid off. I mean, there was a talent restructuring that happened, and I think people kind of forget that. With all the changes that are happening now with the agencies, what type of senior leaders are you seeing successfully evolve their skill sets? And what are they actually doing differently besides, I don't know, kissing their boss's ass and posting about AI on LinkedIn?
So I'm going to say this sort of goes throughout all of the levels, from junior to middle to senior. And I really think about the successful levels, people at different levels. And I really believe it's around the relationship building, and that's the red thread that goes through it all. How the senior leaders work very closely with clients, how they work very closely with their fellow leaders in a group setting, but really sort of developing relationships is key. So, when I let's look at juniors for an example, right? Where they realize, and we all should realize, that their roles at the very beginning of a company is gone, right? Automation is taken that away. So what's left is basically being the sort of like the insights and the culture and the understanding of what the consumer is really after in terms of a product or like. So how do the juniors are able to communicate that upstream? How are they supposed to work closer with senior management? And so again, they're adding value as soon as they come into the company. I mean, I go back to when I was at WPP. We launched the WPP fellowship as an example in Asia. We had a great brand, I suppose, and we had like 10,000 applicants, and we had to whittle that down to 2. And so we were very lucky and fortunate to have such a great talent pool. And we then sort of were able to say, okay, what are we looking for? We're looking for someone who's a fantastic strategist, someone who's curious, all of these things. And you can just see now those people that were identified and then had also the relationships with senior people in VPP when they first started, they have all gone on to do fantastic things in their career. And I think in some ways that's a good example of having someone at a very junior age, bringing in as much value creation as possible, having as much relationships as possible, and sort of running with that. So I do see the need for having young people, in a creative and media agency world, and they won't be doing like an automaton's role, obviously, but they will be contributing as soon as they get in. When you look at the opposite and you go to senior level, the ones that succeed are the ones that have the relationship with clients. They are the ones that have a senior conversation and are able to work across the gamut, both with creative and with other agency leaders. And so that is really what I'm sort of getting at. We all know there's going to be a reduction in personnel at all the agencies. And I think, we're it would be a bit too silly to sort of say that that's not going to happen. That is definitely happening. We all have friends in the industry who have lost their roles. And I think for them to succeed, it's all about building relationships in the roles they have already or have had, and building on that and having a fantastic network that they can rely on to find the next thing. What is the next thing is also, you can't expect to just have the same job title anymore. And it's, it can be seen as an exciting time to sort of branch out and do things that you hadn't done before. I know I look at things quite optimistically, and I guess that's always been in my purview anyway. But I do believe that if you are able to sort of carve out a fractional life or a consulting life, it can add, a lot more enjoyment to what you're currently doing.
Are we going to end up in structures that have people in expert roles, or do we anticipate to have more generalists? And I say this with this mindset of, because you're a generalist powered by artificial intelligence, you can do a lot more of more. Is that better than someone that is an expert powered by artificial intelligence, i.e. a team of 10 interns or mechanical interns? Like what's, or do we think both will coexist? Are we suggesting senior to mid talent to be strategic, to understand creative product, to understand media math, et cetera, et cetera? Are we, when we think about how people need to be reskilled for a future state, are we asking them to be jack of all trades?
Yes, a great question. I do believe I come from the sort of Ogilvy background, and I think it has shaped how I feel a lot about what we call a generalist in an Ogilvy, right? Where you've got a whole understanding of like a holistic view of marketing, and then being able to work with specialists that you can bring in if and when you need them. And I always sort of go back to the whole idea of having strategy in the center of that all, right? But the reason why I bring that back is because that's where the smarts, should lie. That's where not just the creative from creative agency or the planning for a media agency, but the sort of the glue that sort of binds it all together is from the real strategy.
Yeah.
So relationships wise, again, it's very important to be able to sort of have that glue, that context with all the different disciplines. And at the very top, you've got someone who understands that, who can bring those people in when they need it. And so going back to, again, Yako's view of like what an agency would look like, it would be some very senior relationship builders who would be in charge. But they would be able to then bring in different disciplines and different strengths if and when they need it, depending upon the client. So what I particularly like about like the Publicis model is, we don't really talk about it that much, is that flexibility that it can give to the clients. So if the clients don't want to have social media, they don't have to buy it directly off Publicis. They can still have everything else, and they're not sort of bound into a contract where they have to use the different disciplines within Publicis Group. And I think that's something that the other agencies have sort of just said, no, you've got to buy it all, you've got to be in it all, you've got to have that. But
Apple versus the PC model of advertising and communications.
Yeah, and what it basically means is that the client sort of feels like their hands are tied when they sign a contract, and they're not feeling like they get the best that they can from outside. It goes both ways, because I think also the agencies that don't have it on a platter will then try and get it on a platter. So, we see again, the Publicis model recently winning the North American media business for Coca-Cola. And they're like, okay, well, now that we've got this, we now have to go for everything else as well, right? And I guess that is what they are aiming to do. So they have a goal, and they know what they're aiming for, but they're not going into the client and saying, we want all of it. We're going to work hard to get it. And I think that's down to really around what the client leaders from Publicis are actually doing a much better job, because those client leaders have a lot more autonomy and responsibility that's been given to them. And unfortunately, again, I listened to Mark Heap's podcast where he was saying that the real responsibilities were still, and the authority still came from the the brands and from the agencies. And even though they had a client lead, that client lead didn't have much responsibility. In fact, it was really more like firefighting more than anything else. And so that hasn't worked well for them, and it has worked better.
Sometimes the client role in the former setup of WPP was really just being able to fight for resources internally within the organization. So it was a cost, it's kind of like a cost on top of what the client was paying just to get traffic, to get the creative director, get the art director, get the strategy person, et cetera, et cetera. And there wasn't any value created by that individual. He or she was just kind of a glorified assistant.
And more importantly, the talent pipeline is then stuck, because once that has actually come into the void and everyone can see that this client role is not a plum job. It sounds like it's a plum job, but it's not. It's just, as you say, glorified dispatcher. Then nobody really wants to keep on going up that talent pipeline. Whereas a publicist model, those people have got responsibility. So therefore, managing director at a country level could see that as another sort of pipeline for them to accelerate towards. And in WPP or other agencies, that wasn't there. So that was I think that's been a big issue for keeping, good staff within WPP.
Hey, how would you compare this with the consulting companies? Because your thought on organizing service teams around clients, strategy at the center, being able to pull in strategic resource or expert resource whenever needed. This role of account management obviously doesn't exist. They're all consultants. They all have value to offer. They're there to sell time. Consulting companies cracked that model, I guess, decades ago. Publicis perhaps 10 years ago, and the rest of us are playing catch up. Do you agree, disagree? Are we all kind of, working towards that consulting model a bit more? Or is there a third model that you anticipate as we kind of continue to evolve?
Well, I mean, I can say, culture plays such a vital role in an agency and also a consultancy. And I know a lot of consultants who've gone to the other side from an agency world, and they generally give us the view that it's all about work, and and there's hardly any play. There's a plethora. There's a lot of people that from the consultancy side that do feel that way. And what I find is, again, going back to what Mark Heap said, it was so true. When you look at a agency like a creative agency, and you look at what the consolidation has actually done, it's kind of created the morale where you just have to toe the party line, and you have to follow what regional and what global has set aside what to do. And creative agencies naturally attract mavericks. They attract people who are off the beaten track because of their ideas and because of their creativity. But when you consolidate from a regional and global team into a country team, you kind of get rid of those people by default. And so all that you're left with are people who are just saying, yes, I can do that, without actually saying, why am I doing this? I really, and I do believe that. I think that you can see that actually from how the creative agencies have had to conform into where they are today. It's not much fun. Generally, it's not much fun. So I think consultancies, if you say they've cracked it, they have cracked it. When it comes to winning clients, having the best training. I mean, the whole idea of having a bench of specialists and consultants who, if they're not actually working on a client, they're also therefore in training, and they're doing lots of different training programs, waiting for the next client to come in. I mean, that's unheard of within a group holding environment, right? But it makes complete sense. So those sort of tricks that consultancies have created are fantastic. The question is do you want to work in that environment? Do you want to move from a creative agency to a consultancy? I would say that's really up to the individual if they feel like they want to
pursue that as a career,
to work in that space. Yeah, I'd like to think that there would be an option open to mavericks to be part of this industry still.
Yeah.
And have that creativity, have that strategy. I mean, creativity in itself is very different from when I first started, years ago working at Ogilvy. It was like only the ECD and the creative team were the ones that should be having the creative ideas. And I remember Ogilvy, there was this whole idea of that, no, everyone has to have ideas, but maybe more ideas coming from creative than others, perhaps. But the whole idea now is it's a very different world. Like everybody has different ideas. I think, content creators, account service people, strategists, they're all coming up with different ideas because it's not just within one parameter of TVCs, it's everything, right? From technology platforms and everywhere else. So
Yeah. Everything's media. Everything's media. And the world view or the view of what can be advertising and what can serve as media has changed so much over the last, 10 years. It's no longer linear in formats. One thing that you mentioned earlier, just getting young people in, there's still great value in having young people on the floor to contribute to ideas, just unlocking though and inspiring them to kind of see the world through, through that advertising lens. And I guess what I mean by that is looking at it from the lens of what consumers see and be able to turn what they see into opportunity for brands. And I don't think they necessarily do that, but I think that's something that can certainly be trained. And I don't know that artificial intelligence will be able to kind of translate product packaging or floor space or walls or, because you still need that human genius to kind of, I don't know, the sense of just chaotic thinking, disconnected thinking to kind of come up with great ideas. And that's still a human kind of, that's still human effort and human input. So I certainly see young people doing a lot of that. I wonder if there is, there's creative businesses that now increasingly focus on media, and there are media companies that claim to have a creative product. Are agencies still recruiting?
the idea of what talent's responsibility now I see within agencies is very different to what it was before. And I think looking back, I described about how value creation and relationships from all areas is so important. I think talent management within an agency is about bringing that all together, and about trying to connect the juniors closer to the seniors, to connect the senior leadership team with the rest of the group and between themselves. And a lot of that, I think, is around sort of team dynamics and about creating psychological safety within an organization where people can talk about what they want.
What sort of an expectation does the market have from talent leaders as it relates to the agency that's ready for 2025?
Well, I mean, like the agencies themselves, I think talent management has to change radically as well. And I think a lot of the focus is going to be away from the automation, what HR was. And going back to what I was saying about how companies now have to rely on better relationships and sort of having the connection, not just between juniors and seniors, but also between seniors and the leadership team and seniors of everybody else. The whole idea is that talent has to really focus upon building on those relationships and coming up with better ideas and thinking around how to provide that psychological safety for the group as a whole. And so that has to change. And unfortunately, you can see that kind of radical change would have to require a different person in the HR talent role. There's just not been enough investment on that side of things from each local small agency group. From a wider agency group function, maybe they can think of something to be drastic and to change all of that. With that kind of consolidation between having 5 or 6 HR directors in one market, there only needs to be one now. So how that person's or that person's team's role is really about supporting the leaner organization and to focus on value creation. It goes back to value creation, well, Nathan.
Yeah, of course. Like I'm going to pick up on the earlier half of the of what you said as well. I guess the expectation from from young people today is that they're able to do a lot more. But in order to do a lot more, typically or generally, I guess this is me making a broad stroke statement. The expectation also, though, is that the environment allows for people to share ideas, to not feel, like they're not feel uncomfortable in the sharing of those ideas. And I guess that, creating that team environment or creating an environment where young recruits, seasoned or, experts within that agency can collaborate and get the best out of young people. That seems to be something that's not a priority. Is that would you agree, or is that something that, or at least I don't recall talent management being heavily involved in creating culture, and culture takes years to build and develop. Would you agree, or?
I wouldn't want to overstep the mark of what talent, should or shouldn't do, but I do feel that a lot of the role is going back to providing that psychological safety. Now, I think the new type of training, the new type of talent is around allowing people to sort of say what they want to say without there being repercussions. And there's always been, a lot of hierarchy, and that has to all change now. You can't really afford hierarchy anyway. So I think the organization is just going to get leaner anyway. Going back to what you asked about, like the T specialisms rather than the generalists, I think how you're going to see agencies grow is there's going to be specialists in each area, but it's going to be transacted by sort of platforms going across it. So the obvious ones are the whole back office is just going to go straight through the platform. But then what we're going to also see is strategy go straight through the platform. And then, when we need particular specialisms, that's when we'll start to bring them in. So I think based on that, you've got to start putting the right teams together and working closer together. We've worked at agencies where there's so much rivalry and there's so much competitiveness that, and there's the lack of the one P&L. Everyone has always talked about there being like a one P&L, but in reality, that's never been the case. And not many people, not many groups have solved that. The ones that are winning the narrative are saying that they have one P&L, but in essence, they're still coming to terms with it. So how do we get from working individually to working as a team? I think that's what's really interesting and important. And I do a lot of that at the moment. I'm helping teams get closer together, really work more closely and not fight over how much revenue they're going to take. And I think that's really one of the most important things to sort of overcome.
Yeah.
That's also down to a new compensation model. That's down to how you charge your client. It's something that I think is just an ongoing thing. Hopefully it will start to come to fruition because of the drastic changes that are happening.
Of course. I wonder if I wonder if the way advertisers remunerate agencies will dictate the one P&L or an expectation towards the one P&L. This obviously hasn't hit. I don't know if this is something that's affected Europe and North America, but certainly, while we were in China, a lot of what was sold to clients was attached to a hard-coded KPI. And I wonder if KPI delivery, conversions, goals, sales, revenue. So what I'm getting to is like, there's so much more. There's a lot of tooling on platforms, and platforms being big internet companies where we advertise on. There's a lot of insight that you can capture in consumers on those platforms as well. There's a lot of transparency in the way advertising is managed, handled, the logistics of it. And so finer intermediation, which is where our agencies come in, is limited or sometimes even unnecessary. And so that intermediation needs to be attached to some kind of a value, a value offer. And that value offer, I guess, in my mind, is equal to being able to kind of predict the type of impact that advertising will have against, that platter of media opportunity. And so I guess what I'm getting to is, that compensation model between client and agency, if that changes, then the single P&L, having P&L that is not led by who's most senior in the organization or who runs what function or how large your client is, but it's led by how it's led by the relationship that you have with that client and your ability to deliver against a revenue goal or a conversion goal or an awareness goal or a media goal. And I think because of the transparency that exists today in media and advertising, I think that intermediation will force companies to be a lot more nimble. I think, and this is a problem that only the groups have. It's only the holding companies have. It's only the companies that are listed have. You go to any company that's not listed, that isn't, that's nimble. It's 100%. They're delivering a lot more They're creating a lot more value. They have better relationships with clients, spend a lot more time with them. They strike on many more positives versus any of the holding companies. The only reason clients come to a holding company is because they've got offices around the world. This Publicis example that you just shared on Coca-Cola, I wonder if there's going to be a general deconstruct kind of a deconstruct of relationships between agency and advertisers, so that relationships are market specific and you don't have to deal with all the baggage that comes with the one P&L that we pass off to clients but we have to pull resources and experts from across our region and network. Anyway, I think that's what we're getting towards, and I wonder if, I don't know, do you agree, or are there other kind of variables at play?
Well, interestingly, I mean, I know for a fact that Accenture has a different remuneration and compensation model, and how they work with their clients is different. And, they work like as a JV with a particular client, where they invest a percentage of, their time and energy so they can get a profit from starting a new business. But that's something that, that's a listed company. I can't see why, a group holding company can't do those things, but I don't think they have really thought that out of the box when it comes to that yet. I do believe, though, that some agency models are going to change because of it. And because of that, therefore, the compensation and remuneration will also change. So, it's very late in the day to talk about how agencies charge clients. I think they should have been doing that a long, long time ago. But I do think it's probably going to happen pretty soon. And when that happens, then everything else will start to domino.
Talking about coaching, and specifically about that limiting belief you encounter when you coach, agency professionals. What are some things that you find in terms of consulting and working with professionals that you find one of the challenges?
That's a great question. I normally get contacted when things aren't going great. It's normally when things are coming to the end of a relationship, and there has to be some thinking and some coming to terms with things, right? And I think it's becoming more and more prevalent, unfortunately. A lot of what I try to do is reframe the thinking and the conversation to, as you said it quite nicely, limited beliefs in what the individual can do. And I think what I try to do is get them to think outside of what they are capable of doing. Their life does not revolve around working at a media agency or a creative agency. It's a lot more to do with that. And it's an inherent fear of trying to break out of that. When you get pushed into that, it's obviously a very difficult time. It's firstly coming to terms with it more than anything else. It's grief, sadness that has to be overcome. And that takes time. It takes more than 1 or 2 sessions for that to come out. Why me? Why couldn't it have been somebody else? Is it because of the things that I've done? And more often than not, it certainly isn't. It literally is the agency world. Now, we could nitpick and talk about the fact that they maybe they didn't have a strong relationship with clients, whatever. But I think more often than not, it's just coming to terms with it. And then once it's come to terms with it, it's easier to then say, okay, so what's next? But not taking on that sadness first and then trying to then sort of leapfrog and do something else. That's a difficult time. So individually, that's the kind of coaching that I do. And as you said, it's kind of like trying to break through limited beliefs.
What happened with me, I was thrusted out of a job because I don't know, I just didn't get along with my boss. And I was faced that fact where I was so used to moving from one big job to another that I suddenly, after 2 months of not getting any leads, I was faced the fact that I had to make some adjustments. And what really changed my perspective was, as you said in the outset of the podcast, was I started calling my former clients, and I suddenly realized that they were willing to take me on, mainly because I set my expectations very low, and I didn't really ask them for all the huge money that an agency would charge. I didn't ask them for 400,000 renminbi for a simple consulting job. I asked them for 20,000. I didn't ask a lot. I said it was easy to help. And I suddenly realized that people were really willing to take my advice, and I had a lot of success with that. And I certainly wasn't making the big bucks that I was before. But as to your point about relationships and keeping those in contact, and that, more importantly, I found that clients are a hell of a lot friendlier when I didn't come with them from a big agency. It was just me. And I thought that they really appreciated and valued my work and time. And it gave me a lot of confidence to think that there was life outside of being a CEO at an agency.
Well, I mean, I think it's down to, again, I go back to the same thing, value creation, right? It's much harder to create value when you've got a massive group holding company behind you than if you've just got yourself, and you can be incredibly flexible in what you can offer. And I truly believe that's where I think a lot of us at this age are moving towards. A lot of the work that I do is really about consulting and giving advice and supporting. And when I look back at my job at both WPP and IPG and even, running a executive search business, what I enjoyed most was just being able to listen deeply, let people be heard. There's so many examples, so I won't go into it, but I just felt that particular way of coming towards people and helping them and doing it individually just created so much more impact, not just for them, but also for me. I felt like I was worthwhile. A lot of the times at WPP, I listened to a lot of people's issues and problems, and there was not that much I could really do about it. I couldn't give them more money. I couldn't give them an increase in their title. I couldn't let that person go that they were moaning about. It's not up to me. But in the position that I am now, I know that everything that I say doesn't go out one ear and out the other, both internally within a group company and also with the person that I'm speaking to. So, I'd say my life has got a lot more meaning, I suppose. And fortunately, because of the number of people that I work with, it has also been, financially good as well. And I think, fractional, or you can call it whatever you want. It's consulting, basically. Is if you really sort of find out what you're good at, and there are so many talented people in this industry, it's crazy. I mean, Bryce, many people sort of knew you as being, a CEO in the agency world. I've known you longer. I know that you play musical instruments. I know that your Chinese is spot on. There is so much more to every individual, but being boiled down to just what your title is and what you do, that's just a silly game that people play. So, I think we spoke a couple of weeks ago, and I said I might have something for you, in terms of a role. And I suddenly realized there's no way I'm bringing you back into this game. I don't want to bring you back into this game. You're doing so much more, which I think is not just, it doesn't matter to me, but it matters to you, right? You're doing so much more, which is more meaningful to you. You're doing this damn podcast. You got your music going on. You're teaching young children. You're teaching children. Sorry, you're doing students. You've got it all.
I do miss the industry a lot. I love the pace of things. I love the working with very smart, creative people. I miss the pace. Academia moves much slower.
It's slower, but it gives them a lot of time to think. And that's what we don't get time to do at agencies, right? We just do a lot. We just don't get time to think. And he can choose to work with agencies should he want to. I was thinking whether agencies should kind of, your account executive or your young creative is sourced from a university in their second year, just so that, instead of them having no job when they graduate, what if Bryce was in the second year shipped off his students to an agency or into a content creation or media company, so that they, so that part of the curriculum got blended into real life experiences. So when they finish that program, they're ready to find a first job, and they already have 2 years of experience under the belt at that point. So it's 4 years, 2 years of work, ready to find a first job.
Well, that's called an apprenticeship.
I face the students all the time. They're always asking me about entry-level people and how they can network and how they can get into roles. I mean, my students tell me these are Americans telling me that, and Chinese as well. They applied to 100 jobs. They've tried everything, and they're just always asking me about how the best way to market themselves. I don't know if you can give any advice. on the entry level side of like what people should do and what they shouldn't do?
Yeah, well, I do believe that it's not them that's the problem. It's the agencies that haven't worked out what they want young people to do. And so they don't have any roles open to them because their version of what young entry level people will be doing is entry level work, which is what AI roles are all about. So they have to, so it's the agencies, it's the companies that have to think about what roles are needed for people. And so that's the disconnect, right? The quality has never been better when students are coming out from the universities. It's just that the companies don't know what to do with them, right? So that's the disconnect. And I think that's just going to get better through time. And again, we are going through a consolidation, right? This is a tsunami that is going to last a lot longer, but it will start to peter out. And then companies are going to really start to think about what kind of people that they really want to bring into the organization at the junior level. I do believe this because, again, I go back to the WPP fellowship, right? Because we identified really good people and we gave those people opportunities to connect with the senior talent and all the levels with not just the creative agencies, but media agencies and everything. You get these young people in to be the connection, to be the relationships not just at the junior level, but throughout the entire organization. And then they can, now more than ever, the whole idea of connecting to the consumer, all of those ideas will come up from the bottom up. We could use insights agencies and we can use people, trendsetters outside. You don't need to. You just have to get the people underneath to sort of be able to talk about what they are doing on a sort of like regular basis. When the froth starts to calm down, I think companies are really going to start thinking about what they want for entry. And again, it's not going to be called entry level anymore. It's going to be like the identification is going to be of like the best people in the market who are going to have confidence, the ability to stand up on stage. I find that to be probably one of the most important things when you want somebody young sort of be front and center, you want them to be presenting, so they've got to go through drama classes. They've got to be able to perform on stage, so like any parent who is worried about what they want from their children, it's about giving them confidence. It's about giving them the ability to sort of get up on stage and just sing your heart out. And that's probably all that you can sort of just offer them. But you know what? To be a parent of those children, you've got to be super encouraging. You've got to be with them, holding their hands day in, day out. You can't just let, this is something I've learned recently. You just can't let the schools dictate what's going to happen, because you the most precious thing in your life, you're not going to give it to somebody else to screw up. So you take a vested interest in what they do. I know that sounds like one-on-one parenting. Again, as an adult, as a senior person, you've probably got more time on your hands because you're not working so much for one person, having your head down. You're doing more fractional work, you're doing more consulting, and you're spending more time at home. Hopefully, that's what I would give advice to. Spend more time with your family, spend more time with your kids. They're going to need it because they are the world of work, or the future world of work, is a very difficult place, and you're going to be competing with a whole bunch of other people. And if you're not investing as much time and energy of your kids than you are with your portfolio of stocks, then you're gonna reap what you sow.
Yeah, that's awesome, Jean-Michel. Very inspirational. Not just that, but all the things that you've said on the podcast today. I think it touches to a lot of people in terms of how they're feeling right now. And your vote of optimism and confidence in people's success, it's very addictive and it's very encouraging. So we really appreciate your comments, and it's been really enjoyable talking to you today. And thank you very much for being on the show.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be speaking to you guys like this. Normally it's just a one-on-one for both of you, but this has been wonderful. Thanks for allowing me to riff with you guys.
No, good. We appreciate the public therapy session that we got today. Send us the bill. And thank you for everyone for joining us on today's episode. Join us in a few weeks for another exciting show. And to all our listeners, until then, have a great day.